Welcome to Spotlight ETSU. I'm your host, Carrie Oliveira. Today I'll be speaking with Karen Brewster and Melissa Schafer about their new book, The Fundamentals of Theatrical Design. Karen and Melissa are associate professors in the Department of Communications Theater and Dance Division. Both have designed for shows around the country, including Barter Theater in Abingdon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
We totally appreciate you being here. So we're going to talk about all the fun, exciting things that you do. We're going to talk about your book. But first, I want to know some about you guys, and so I want to know how it is that where you're from and how you've spent your career and how it is you ended up at ETSU. So I don't care which one of you starts.
I think Melissa should start.
Okay, Melissa.
Okay, I'm from Illinois originally.
It's the Midwest.
It is. It's very landlocked. If you come from Hawaii, I suppose it seems like. Literally grew up in a cornfield.
In a cornfield?
In a cornfield.
They build houses in cornfields?
They do.
Oh.
So I grew up in a cornfield in Illinois, went to Southern Illinois University. From there, taught at the University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Okay.
Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And Loyola University in New Orleans, and then came here from there.
Oh. And what brought you ultimately to Tennessee?
Well, you know, ultimately, I had camped in East Tennessee several times.
Literally, like when camping?
Like in a tent.
Oh.
And thought, this is a beautiful area of the country. If a job ever came open, I would go for it.
And ta-da!
And here I am.
And magically now here you are.
I know.
And how long have you been at ETSU now?
Since '99, which makes it what, 12, 13 years? 12 years? 13 years? 12?
Sure, let's go with that.
Okay.
I'm not good with the adding in my head.
Yeah.
Subtracting technically. So 12 years and all over the place, and you're staying with us forever and ever, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. That makes me happy. Karen, what about you? Where are you from? How'd you get here?
I am a native of this area.
Oh.
Was born in Chattanooga, but raised in Johnson City. Product of East Tennessee State University, undergrad.
Yay.
But went to Michigan State University for my graduate
Me
program.
too.
I know. We are fellow Michigan State alums.
You're both Spartans.
We
Yeah,
are.
we are both Spartans.
Mm-hmm. They did not do well in the basketball tournament, can I just say? No, a little upset
it
about
was
that.
sad about that. I always like to cheer them on when they're doing that.
I appreciate that.
And then I worked professionally in the theater after getting my degree for several years. Worked at the Barter Theater for several years full time. And then happened to be reading the Johnson City Press, because I was living in Abingdon at the time, and saw an ad for a costume designer at East Tennessee State University in the Johnson City Press. And thought, well, maybe I should apply for that. So
Ta-da, here
I did.
you are.
Yeah, here I am.
And so you've been at ETSU then for how long?
Melissa came a year before I did, so I started in 2000.
Oh, so yay. We are so lucky to have you guys.
Oh,
and
thank
you
you.
spend a lot of time doing shows and stuff. And so did either of you, like when you were little and you thought to yourself, here's the thing, like when I was a kid, I thought I really wanted to be an astronaut. That was what I decided I wanted to do when I was a child. And I maintained I was going to be an astronaut. It never occurred to me that one would think to themselves, I want to be a costume designer. So how is it that you came to decide that this is what you wanted to do in your life? Like, was this something you knew when you were a child? I mean, you don't have words for things like costume designer, do you, when you're little?
No, I didn't.
No. And so how did you come to this?
I always liked doing creative things and artistically oriented things.
Are you an artist? Do you consider yourself an artist?
Well, I do, yes. As designer, I am an artist, I think, hopefully artistic. But I was always creative, always loved creative things. I did not know about costume design until later, but I got my bachelor's degree thinking I wanted to be an actress. So I did a lot of acting because I didn't know anything about costume design.
Right.
But I did a work study position here at ETSU in the costume shop.
And then you were like, oh, this is better than acting?
Yeah. Eventually, it suited me better.
I see. Yes. No, I definitely can appreciate
Suited
that.
me better. So.
And Melissa, when you were like 5, you were like, yes, I want to do lighting for a living.
No, actually, I took art in high school and a couple of drama classes, but it was predominantly art, and I went to college with the thought of being a studio artist, taking art and design classes. But my first semester got involved in the theater, and it was much more social and fun, and I thought, well, I'll do that.
Art happens a lot in isolation, yes? Like
Yes, it does.
You have to think and be with yourself.
You're in your
head
studio
and-
off alone, painting, sculpting, drawing, whatever you're doing.
What medium were you planning to work in?
I didn't know. I was 17. Who knew, you know?
Oh, you just knew you wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
You didn't care
I
what?
wanted to go into the art field. And, you know, as to what particular branch of that, I really didn't know at that time.
So you ended up doing lighting.
Lighting and scenic design. I actually studied both.
Oh. And which do you prefer?
I like them both.
Oh, equally?
Equally,
Aren't
I
they
think.
very different?
Yes,
When you're talking about
yes and
scene,
no.
when you're talking about scene design, what are we actually talking about? What does that refer to? Like constructing a set or designing a set, like figuring out what's supposed to be
It's
in
the design of the set, right.
Oh.
A lot of people make that mistake, or I don't know if it's a mistake, but they think, like for me as costume designer, that I'm just sewing the clothes. But if I'm designing, like a guest designer at Barter Theater,
Right.
I don't touch a sewing machine or a needle.
So how does one go about designing anything? It's just planning, thinking?
That's what our book is.
What a nice segue.
What a nice segue. So you guys wrote this really beautiful book, right? Full of information and charts and words that I've never heard before and a color wheel. And this is basically what? A manual on how to do theatrical design. All
For
aspects
beginners.
and elements of theatrical design for beginners.
It's oriented for the beginning design student, and what's different about it is it's holistic. It has all the areas, has costume, lighting, and scenic.
Is
those
that
three areas.
atypical of a book such as this one?
Absolutely. That's why we decided to write it, because there is not a book like this for our class, for our Theater Design Basics class here at ETSU. There is not that holistic beginning.
To give a broad overview of all the elements of doing design.
And we found that we were duplicating, like script analysis and color.
Right.
We were duplicating a lot, and we thought, that's why we developed the course, Theater Design Basics, so that we could teach the students these things that we were duplicating in other classes. And then when we got to the course and said, okay, we're going to teach them this, there was no...
Couldn't find a good textbook?
Not really. No, there were a lot of...
I mean, that's hard enough to do anyway.
Yeah.
To find a good textbook for anything.
We were piecing together 2 or 3 textbooks.
And that's incredibly inefficient.
Yeah.
And so you decided to, enough of this. We're just going to go ahead and write a book. So if I read this book, I could totally design a
We hope,
theater set.
yeah.
Totally.
Wow!
We hope so.
I'm going to go and read it over the weekend, and then I'm going to put on a play next week.
Good. Designing all the areas.
All the areas.
Yeah.
How long does it take to design a play or a production? Or play? Is that the right word? What is the correct word? A play? They're not all plays, though, are they?
Absolutely not. The dance is...
Not a play.
Right. Not a play.
So
Musical is a play with music.
Right.
Oh, I'm aware of plays with music.
Yeah.
My musical's very inefficient.
So we
but-
often say production.
A production,
Because
yeah.
it could be, could
And
vary.
so how long does it take to design a production from start to finish? Or does that depend on like the number of people in the production or
Depends
the
on
nature
the
of the
producing
thing?
organization sometimes too, and how fully fleshed out the production is going to be, how much money they're putting into it, how much, how elaborate it's going to be.
How familiar you are with the space in
And-
terms of scenic design.
Right.
And with
right.
the people you're working. I mean, you may
Yeah.
have worked with this director before, and maybe you've got some shorthand that you can work with. I know how they work, and
Yes.
it kind of makes it quicker.
Yeah.
But I would say you start months in advance talking to the director. You usually get the script, I'd say about 6 months in advance, 5 months in advance, depending on the play.
Here at ETSU, yeah, we usually work that far in advance.
And so you will read the script and you will talk with the director, and you may not have regular close meetings yet, but you will have communication with the director and understand what the director is going for with the production, understand the script, and you do a lot of research. And then you start coming together slowly, maybe a few months in advance. You'll come together for production meetings to discuss, concepts again.
Right.
So that hopefully you're on
So
the same page.
everybody's on the same page, right?
Absolutely.
Because I imagine as a designer, you have your idea, right? You can see the thing in your head. I imagine that's a really important part of doing design, is being able to see the final product in your head at some point. And I imagine the director sees their own version of that same thing, but from a different perspective. And to converge, I imagine, requires a great deal of coordination and talking. And
It's a collaborative art form.
Oh.
Absolutely collaborative. And we have a little section on collaboration in the book because it's such an important part of it. And communication and collaboration.
Yes.
Very important.
Otherwise, you can't get anything done.
Right. And so even when we're communicating, you may think you're being very clear,
Right.
as you know.
Yes.
And you're not.
Not at all.
So there are some pitfalls there.
So if there's a design concept difference between the designer's vision of the thing and the director's vision of the thing, who wins?
Director.
Because it's their play?
They're
Even though you're an artist and you know what you're doing?
Well, there needs to be one guiding person.
Oh, and they're always the boss.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Depends on the
It depends on the director. It does.
And their concept.
It does.
You know, sometimes you think, oh, okay.
Yeah, but you do it anyway because it's your job. I mean, you do it. Or you might find ways to try to convince them of your ideas, especially if it's early on.
Yes, I imagine saying, like, 4 months in, so this idea you have about, I don't know, we're going to dress up all these water nymphs as samurai warriors. That's a bad idea. You don't say that 4 months in, I would imagine.
Well, and you don't really say that's a bad idea usually.
That's very diplomatic of you.
You try to be,
What are you trying to say with making them samurai warriors? What are you trying to...
That's the sort of thing that I would think to do.
Where are we going with that?
Where are we going with that?
Are we going with that? Nowhere, nowhere productive, most likely. So I just find this whole thing very interesting. When I was in high school, I was in one play. It was the Song of Bernadette, the story of Bernadette of Lourdes, and I don't actually remember the plot. I was the mother, and our costume designer was our art teacher, Mrs. Wood, and her husband from our brother's school down the street. I went to an all-girls high school, and so we had to import the boys from down the street. So their art guy, Mr. Wood, was the director, and Mrs. Wood, our art teacher, was the set designer and the costumer. And so she had us all lined up, and she was trying to make costuming decisions. And I'm playing the mother of this child, and I'm supposed to be impoverished and just work-worn and all of that. And she walked up to me and she said, you don't need any makeup. I was like 15, right? I'm like 15 or 16 years old. She's like, you're fine just like you are. And I was like, oh, that's really offensive. I was offended about it for like 2 days. So how do you, like, when you're making design decisions, how do you...
Not offend your people?
Yeah, how do you not offend a person? Like, how does that happen? I imagine there's a lot of ego involved, right? Like, every individual, every actor is an ego that you have to deal with on top of the director or whatever else. And so how do you... What amazes me about a production is that you somehow manage to find a way to make everybody happy? Make everybody feel good about themselves?
They may not be all happy.
Oh. And
but you find a way, hopefully, to make them okay with it. You know, it may be different. But you want them to be happy.
Yes.
You strive
they'll
for
act
that.
better if they're happy, right?
Well, they need to feel good about what they're wearing
Right.
in order. And it really does, and I'm talking about costume design now. We're segueing from the production.
Well, no, you deal, and I've said this a million times, she deals with actors far more than, as a lighting designer, I just say, find your light, and,
Right.
could you step one step to the left, that kind of thing. But
now the set, you may deal with the actor a little more.
a little bit more in properties, some, but you deal with them on such a one-to-one basis.
And having them feel good about it is an important part of the costume design and designer's job. And it is important to make them feel good.
Yes.
They will proceed with confidence.
Yes.
Which they need to do.
And
that doesn't mean they look like a fashion model.
No, not at all.
But
They look like they're supposed to.
Like you say, the mother of the young child, you want to feel appropriate.
I
was going to say, you actually address this in the book a little bit and likens it to a professional relationship like a doctor with a patient, because she's seeing them in various states of dress or undress.
Yes.
And
there's an inherent intimacy to seeing someone partially naked.
Yeah.
Right.
Or taking their measurements, or any number of things.
I know. Measuring
private.
the seam.
She's very good with massaging would be the wrong word. with working with the person to make them feel good about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So not only comfortable with the process, but comfortable with the outcome of the whole thing.
And confident.
That's a lot of people management to do on top of being an artist.
Absolutely.
An extraordinary people skill. And this one has it in spades.
Can you teach that? I mean, you allude to these things in your book or whatever else, and I imagine this is something that you have to address in the content of your course, but can you teach a person to have a sensibility about how to deal with people in that way?
I think you can lead them more in the direction where they need to go. I know that in my experience in professional theater, for example, I have seen, not recently, it seemed to be more the case when I was first starting, a lot of the technical people, people that I worked with in the shop, if they had not had acting courses, which is why we try at ETSU to make sure that you have a little bit of everything, they often would talk very derogatorily about actors and the process and the way actors were. So they didn't really respect what actors did.
That's really unfortunate because without the actors, you don't have a show.
Well, and it's really that's a big trap. And so you don't want to think negatively about them. You need to respect them, because if you truly respect what they do and respect them, it will come across, and that will help with that building of confidence.
Right.
And so you can teach people that part, that you really need to. And one way to do that is for them to know, to be on the other side, to act a little bit, and see what it's like.
Be treated like an actor for a semester at least, and then
see what it's like. Walk in their shoes a little bit.
Man, that's amazing. So sets it could be incredibly complicated. Like,
Yes.
elaborate. And so I recently saw 9 to 5 at the Barter Theater, and their sets were not terribly complicated, right? Basically blocks, right? Everything is basically constructed of blocks, and then they just sort of like move certain blocks out, or they turn them around, or they put like partitions on the stage to hide certain elements of the stage. There's like a puzzle in that, you know, that you can like change these 4 elements around and end up with a different set. You know you're in a different environment.
Right.
And like, how do you go about thinking about a set in that way when you have like limited resources, or you have a certain amount of space, or you can't, like the Northeast State Theater has a spinning stage, right? So I imagine you can have like a couple sets set up at once and you just spin the stage around. Is that how that works?
And a lot of the barter thing, just to add to, and I'll let Melissa, who is the expert, talk about that, but a lot of the barter situation is not just storage on what it's like on stage with
Right.
limited space, but how does it store off stage, because they're a repertory company. So they have another show in the wings.
Oh.
They run maybe 9 to 5 in the afternoon, and I don't remember what's running at night, but they have 2
Yes.
different shows running.
Yeah.
So they have to store the other show back. So a lot of that is the backstage challenge in addition
It
to
would
the
never have occurred to me. Like, where do you put all this stuff when you're not using
So the
it?
designer has to.
Right.
So
Figure all that out.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you know, and everybody works differently. I usually start with a ground plan and or a model of the space.
which we have pictures of in
like
here.
a literal model.
little set model. Yeah, little
Aw.
scale model.
Like Legos.
Yes. And then you take your you can start with a paper model and you just start making little paper in scale so that you can figure out, okay, is this going to fit in this space, and does this come down and cover that, and how are the sight lines from the audience? And it is like a little 3-dimensional puzzle.
Puzzle.
Yeah.
And directors
And
like
that's
the
fun.
model.
It's fun.
Yeah, directors like to look at the model.
Directors
for-
like the model, yeah, because I've had them borrow it to use to actually block, because you make little people
Right.
and they can play
and
with them.
block
and
the
them.
scenes.
Right, right.
Man. So, and you know, this is the thing, right? From the audience perspective, I've never had anything to do with the creation of a theatrical production, but I've seen several, right? And so from the audience, you're just like, oh,
Looks like
that's
magic.
pretty. And somehow that happened. And, you know, in talking to you guys and seeing this book and having you, you all presented the contents of this, the process of writing the book last semester in our department, and just the amount of thought that goes into the planning of the thing, and then to write a book about all of that just blows my mind. Just the skill in all of that is
So of
just
course we don't want
phenomenal
the
to me.
audience to
You don't want the audience to be thinking about the production.
No,
right?
not at all.
You want them
the
to
story.
not see that at all.
They're
right.
coming to see the story, and we're helping tell that story.
We're hopefully sucking them into that story.
Yeah.
And not pulling them out of it.
So you won't necessarily think, oh wow, I bet that took a lot of work. I mean, some people may, but that's not what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Like, right, but I mean, that's because I know you guys, and I now think about theater things, which I didn't used to before, which is really nifty. But yeah, it impresses me that all of that had to happen. That happened in somebody's mind. It happened in Melissa's mind. The costuming happened in your mind, and all of that happens. Ooh, you know what I'm really curious about is makeup. Like weird makeup design. Is that something you do as well? Like, so could you turn me into an alien?
Yeah, I could.
She's doing a class in that right now.
You're doing
Advanced
it
makeup design
Yeah,
with
prosthetics.
prosthetics.
Yeah, we're learning to make prosthetics.
Could you?
Down in the basement of Brooks Gym.
Yeah.
I walk by there sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Your little side doors to Brooks Gym, and I don't know what all is going on. It's
Well,
like
it's amazing.
a whole big bunch of nonsense exploded in there, and I don't know how anything gets accomplished. But what I like about walking past the basement of Brooks Gym is that it feels artistic, like the energy, and you have that weird painted rock on the outside of the door or whatever else. I don't know what else is going on with that, but it feels like an artistic building. You have no idea what the rock.
And
I'm talking
the
about.
rock.
Yeah,
the rock.
that's for
Department
the
of
pit.
Art.
Yeah, that's
I
the
don't know
Department of
what
Art and
it is.
Design. They have student studios.
So it
down-
is
down in
artistic. The whole
basement.
bottom.
It just feels that way, and I mean, you get little peaks.
What's really
I
cool
resist
is-
walking down there when the doors are open.
Oftentimes, bluegrass is above us, so we get bluegrass music
And we
trickling
hear
down
them.
the stairwell.
It's wonderful.
So there's a great kind of feeling there.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm gonna move my office down there.
Yeah, hang out. Come on over.
If
Come
that's
on
cool,
over.
that would be terrible.
Work with us.
Tell me about the process of writing this book. Like talking about collaboration, right? And you guys are
Yes.
friends.
Absolutely. And we're still
And-
friends. We wrote the book and we're still friends. We still
Success!
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? It's a lot of work to write a book.
Oh, I can only imagine.
I'm sure that's
It's
not
enough to write a
anything new.
paper, right? Like a
Yeah.
25-page paper. And this is how many pages? Oh, it's a
Oh,
bunch of
250.
pages.
Couple hundred,
Couple
yeah.
hundred pages. Couple hundred pages of
280,
incredibly technical information. but written in a way that is digestible for an introductory theater
That's
student.
absolutely what we strive for.
And
we also
how
wanted
does
to
one
make it
accomplish that
affordable.
exactly?
I'm sorry.
How does one accomplish that exactly? Right, really technical information for a totally novice audience.
Well, it came out of our class, so we already were versed in presenting this information to beginner students. So I think but that was one thing, and that's what's great about collaborating on a book. I haven't written one on my own, but I know I would miss that if I were to do that.
That's a nice compliment.
Oh yeah,
It is.
well, we
And
would read like
I would never have written a book without.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
well, we would read each other's, and that's what we can work that way. Maybe
Right.
some people can't,
Right,
but we
right.
can, and we would read each other's, and we'd say, "Is it clear?" And I know Melissa maybe got impatient with me,
No,
but the lighting
never.
chapter particularly because it's very technical,
Right.
highly technical.
I imagine it's a lot of geometry. Not really geometry, but like
equipment heavy, like the equipment and the way the equipment
names
is.
of things.
Right.
How to-
And so I would read it because I know like,
you don't know
next
anything
to
about
nothing,
it, so you were
next
trying
to
to
nothing
the
about lighting.
accessibility you were assessing.
Yes. And so I would read it and say, I don't understand this. And she would go back.
Be like, how do you not understand this?
I
I just
know.
totally explained it to you.
But we did that with all the chapters.
Right.
But the one that I remember particularly was the lighting chapter because it was so heavily technical, and I was really kind of nagging her about that.
We did strive, I think, to make it as clear and concise and easy to read as possible.
Yes. I mean, otherwise
So-
people aren't going to read it, right?
Yeah, and you know, if I got tired working on one chapter, I'd jump to another. We kept kind of leapfrogging like that, but constantly sending each other drafts.
How long did this take to write this book?
Well, again, it's hard to judge because we had done basically a lot of research in the class when we were teaching the class together. But the actual sitting down, we had an NIA,
Okay.
you know,
Which is
non-instructional
non-instructional.
assignments,
Non-instructional, yes.
which helped. And so that was, it became our full-time job at that point. And so I would say
About a year.
took about a
About a
year.
year.
But we already had, you know, some stuff.
Right. So you weren't
No.
starting from scratch.
No,
at the
we
start of that
actually
year.
had, I think, 3 sample chapters, and when we actually sat down to write it. And we haven't done it, but it'd be interesting to go back and read the sample chapters now, because they're
compare them.
nothing like what ended up being in the book.
And the interesting thing, and we talked about this in our the book forum we had in
Yeah.
our department, we got a book contract without the book being written,
Right.
which I think is not the common
Not
way.
particularly
But what
typical.
usually it's you at least have a full manuscript, I think. So
I mean, they were taking a chance on you, is what the long story short
absolutely,
was.
They wa-
And
they
especially
was.
since this is, you know, this kind of book doesn't exist, and so you had no precedent for it, there was no model for it, so basically you had to write a book and sell it to the publisher who was like, yeah, you know what, I've got a lot of faith in you, go on. We'll just
Yeah,
go
all we
ahead
had
and
were
write
like
this."
2 or 3 chapters at most, and an idea.
Was that not a lot of pressure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was really a pressure is when, early on in the process, they had us send photographs for the cover.
Oh, yes.
And then they sent us the mock-up cover.
And we weren't. We
And
still had chapters
we were
not
still
unwritten.
writing.
And you're
It
like,
was like, oh my God.
It was
Okay.
nerve-wracking. It was exciting and nerve-wracking all at the same time. It was
Inspiring.
exciting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gave us incentive, but it's like, oh my goodness.
So in 5 seconds this needs to be done.
Yeah,
like
we
we have
really-
a cover
yeah, it's really
and
gonna
no
happen,
content.
yeah.
Let's work
It was
on that.
nerve-wracking.
Oh my goodness. So would you do it again?
We're
We
doing
are
another
doing
one.
You're going to do a part 2?
Well,
We have a contract for, yes, a second book.
and we're a little behind on that. We need to, and the contract, again, it's not written.
I won't tell them.
Okay,
It'll
good.
be a secret.
They don't care as long as we have it
Done
the
by the
that
deadline.
date.
Right?
Right.
You write it like 48 hours in advance,
it
whatever, it
wouldn't
doesn't
be-
matter at all. And so what is that book going to be about?
design, style and genre.
Style and genre.
Style and genre.
Okay, I think of genre with music or literature.
Categories.
Same thing with, well, dramatic literature.
Okay.
Dramatic literature is written in a style.
Okay. So how many genres of more? Explain.
There are tons of genres.
Oh.
I mean, it actually parallels literary style. very,
Gotcha,
very much.
gotcha. Okay.
So there's romanticism and, realism.
And artistic style.
Naturalism and absurdism
Period
and
style.
expressionism and symbolism and
That's a lot of art words. I'm gonna have to, I'm really gonna have to read that book because I don't actually know what you're referring.
we're really going to have to write
You're gonna have
it.
to write
We're really
it.
gonna have to write
you
it.
write it. I'll
And
read it.
hopefully
We'll all
you'll
get
read it.
smarter.
I'm concerned, and I guess Melissa agrees. I think this one's going to be harder to write.
Why is that?
Well, this is our class.
Yes.
And the style and genre book is related to the class, but we're digging a little deeper, and also we're expanding it. The title actually includes, and I can't even remember the title of our second book right now. I thought I was going to write that down and bring it, but I forgot.
It's like a guide for directors, performers, and designers.
Theatrical style and genre, a guide for directors, performers, and designers. So we're expanding
That's even a lovely title.
Expanding our audience.
Yes.
To include directors and performers, not just designers. So we need to.
I dig it.
Yeah, it's going to take some work.
When is that one supposed to be due?
Is it the end of next summer?
I thought it was 2014, but
if
it's 2013,
we need to look at our contract.
In bad shape.
Yeah, I think it may be 2014.
I believe it's the summer of 2014. But
Yeah,
I
she's
certainly
right.
hope that that's the case.
Yeah, no,
Otherwise,
we got a lot of work.
there's a lot of writing
We
this
don't
summer.
have an NIA this time, so we got.
I imagine is going to be a challenge unto itself.
Yes.
So we've got a couple minutes here left, and I'm curious to know what of all the productions that each of you has worked on has been your favorite and why?
She's laughing because I did a guest stint in her class yesterday, and they asked that same question. It's a very common question.
It's a common question,
I mean,
and we both say, how do you answer that? I mean, I don't have a favorite, and I don't know that you do either.
No.
And I think that's maybe a lot of designers would answer that same way. It's
the
like
one
saying,
we just finished doing is probably the
yeah,
Because it's done.
Yes.
yeah, and I think I like. If I just like the type of production, talking about genre categories, I like productions that are kind of craft oriented, like with masks or, which we don't do a lot here. But that was always my favorite as a student. Non-realistic, I guess. And I think Melissa said that
I would say that, I would say
because it gives you a
too.
challenge.
Was it 2 days ago we were at the undergraduate research symposium and a theater student gave a presentation on kabuki theater. Right? And so that kind of thing where there's a huge departure from reality.
He was my student, as a matter of fact.
Right.
That's one category that's interesting to me.
Right.
And Hunter did a great job, Hunter Klein.
I would love to do a production in that style.
Yeah. Do Shakespeare and a kabuki, that would be fabulous.
I think that would be very cool.
Yeah.
I think so too. So that kind of thing is interesting, and I think it's because of the style.
Well, kabuki would be my only frame of reference for something that departs from reality. So could you give me another example of
musical
how that
theater?
might
You mentioned 9 to 5.
Gotcha.
Absolutely not real.
Not.
I mean, when you unless you break into song when you're in love.
I do.
I mean, how do you not go working 9 to 5?
Yeah,
right. I mean, it's catchy. What are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
So things that are unlike reality.
Absolutely.
Which is really interesting to me because part of what I enjoy about theater is that you can go in there and you escape, like all sort of productions, artistic productions there's an escape element to it. But also the ones I like the best are the ones that make me reflect on my own reality. So the further away the production is from being realistic, the harder time I have connecting to it personally. So I think it's really interesting that, and obviously clearly from a designer's perspective, the more stuff you can do, right, the better illusion you can create, the more work you can do in creating.
Of course, realism is a wonderful challenge too. I mean, that's another way of working, which is, I mean, we're not saying we don't enjoy that.
No, I do. There is a certain challenge to recreating something realistically, but creating an abstract of an idea or thought is kind of a neat thing too.
I imagine harder.
A little bit, maybe.
It's certainly more creative.
Yeah.
You're definitely creative people. Even with, I mean, I don't think of lighting as being very creative. Usually it's like, oh, lights, there it is. But no, they make a huge difference. And I paid attention to this when I saw Tallulah Dies. Made a huge difference. The lighting set a mood and whatever else. It was a very important part of the artistic thing, the scene, the whole thing.
It has a great impact on the pacing of the production too, maybe more than you realize, with the cueing. How much the lights change.
The movement of the light.
How quickly they...
You guys are amazing. And I think that you're incredibly talented, and I think that we are so very, very fortunate to have you in our department, and it has been a tremendous pleasure to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to your new book. And so with that, thank you for joining us, Karen and Melissa. We were speaking today with Karen Brewster and Melissa Schafer about their work in theater design. Join us next time on Spotlight ETSU.